All right, so in today's video, we're gonna go over the 3 different body types and how to train for those specific body types, okay? Some people believe in this theory, other people don't. There are 3 body types: Endomorph, Ectomorph, and a Mesomorph. An Endomorph tends to be a bigger person with a bigger bone structure, a slower metabolism, someone who gains fat really easily, someone who has a tough time losing body fat, someone who has a slower metabolism, can put on muscle very easily. Most endomorphs are actually fairly naturally strong. They have a wider hip structure, bigger bone structure. You get the gist of it, a big body, right? Then you have a Mesomorph, which is the ideal athletic body type, someone who can lose fat and gain muscle with relative ease, someone who has a good shoulder to waist ratio, someone who has a pretty good metabolism, not a super fast metabolism, but a pretty good metabolism, someone who, like I said, can easily put on muscle, has a really good metabolism, has an athletic look to him almost naturally, somewhat of a smaller bone structure in comparison to the Endomorph, and just someone who has the ideal athletic body type. An Ectomorph is someone who is usually someone who is very naturally skinny, with a smaller bone structure, with a super fast metabolism, someone who is a hard gainer, has all kinds of problems putting on weight, and has a tough time putting on muscle, someone whose metabolism is just like a friggin' racehorse. It just races each and every day. It's just super fast. Once again, smaller bone structure, fast metabolism, hard gainer, has a rough time gaining muscle. That's a brief overview. There's more characteristics, but that's a brief overview of the 3 body types, okay? Now we're gonna go over how to train for those 3 body types. So, endomorph training. During weight training, so let's back up. So we both know that with endomorphs, they have a tendency to gain body fat really easily. They have a rough time getting rid of body fat. So we know that, let's go ahead and back up to the diet. The diet's gonna be the key with the endomorph. Usually with an endomorph, someone who's an endomorph, you wanna stick with, you wanna watch where you put your carbs at. You probably wanna do a small carb load in the morning, a big carb load pre-workout and post-workout. Now, you don't wanna go super high with the carbs with the endomorph. Typically you wanna do, lower carbs, high protein, medium to high healthy fats. It usually works well for most endomorphs. I'm sure everybody's different, but it works well for most endomorphs. Now, with endomorphs, you can go as high as 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, okay? Maybe even higher in some instances, depending on what they're involved in, what sport or athletic endeavor they're into. So let's go ahead and move to training and cardio for the endomorph. The endomorph during weight training, typically you want to try to use shorter rest periods. So shorter rest periods, supersets, anything that's going to keep the body moving, okay? Because we already know that supersets can speed up your metabolic rate. We already know that shorter rest periods speed up the metabolic rate. And we also know that by keeping the body moving, it can speed up your metabolic rate. So the key is, what I've done with endomorphs in the past that I've worked with is, a superset here and there, a drop set here and there, shorter rest periods here and there. Anything to really shock the body and shock the metabolism is what you're gonna wanna do with endomorphs. Training probably in a hypertrophy rep range of 6 to 12 repetitions. Usually a 12-10-8-6 rep scheme works pretty well, and or a 12-10-8 rep scheme. And then what else? With the cardio with the endomorphs, you want to make sure they're doing some type of, maybe like fasted cardio in the morning at a low intensity, since they are heavier naturally, especially if you get somebody that's definitely got a huge weight issue. So you could probably have them, start out at, 10 to 20 minutes of low intensity in the morning, and then just slowly work your way up from there, okay? Or you could do HIIT cardio, maybe post-weight training, or whatever time they have free during the day to really stimulate that metabolism. You can use LISS or HIIT, so low intensity, steady state cardio, or HIIT cardio, whichever one you prefer as a trainer or coach would be beneficial for an endomorph client. Let's see, what else? Yeah, with endomorphs, be careful even on the cheat days. Their body can really swing in weight drastically very quickly, and things can get out of control very quickly, because if you give them just a little bit, they're gonna want a lot. So moving on, the mesomorph, okay? The mesomorph is the ideal athletic body type. They have, a regular sized bone structure typically. They have a pretty fast metabolism. They tend to put on muscle pretty easily. They tend to lose body fat pretty easily. They can go up or down in weight, whichever one you prefer them to. They're basically the ideal client when it comes just to bodybuilding and physique especially. They have a good shoulder to waist ratio. Their body uses carbs pretty well as far as storing it in the muscle and not using, creating body fat. The diet with the mesomorph, you could go, if it's like a strength training athlete, like a bodybuilder, physique athlete, you could probably do, like high protein, medium to high carbs on certain days, relatively low fats, stick some healthy fats in there to fill the gaps. So the diet for the mesomorph, you can get them, one cheat day a week typically, or cheat meal a week. You don't have to be as strict on the diet as an endomorph would have to be. So let's move on to the training for a mesomorph. Training for the mesomorph is going to be probably a little bit less cardio than the endomorph for sure. Either HIIT cardio or LISS cardio, low intensity steady state cardio, it's up to you. HIIT cardio is high intensity cardio. So you can use either one of those. With training with the mesomorph, as far as workouts, weight training, right? Probably like a hypertrophy rep range, 6 to 12 repetitions, and or 8 to 12 repetitions. You don't want to go super high volume with the mesomorph because their body type, their metabolism and their body type, it can cause them to actually regress instead of progress. So low to medium volume with the mesomorph. You can do a little high volume here and there, but typically, medium to low volume, somewhere in there. Concentrating on both hypertrophy training and some strength-based training. That usually works really well for mesomorphs. Relatively longer rest periods than endomorphs. So like an endomorph, you give them, 30 seconds to 45 seconds in between sets. A mesomorph, you could give them 45 seconds to a minute and a half in between sets. And that's going to help them recover properly between their sets of exercises. The next one would be the ectomorph. Moving on, the ectomorph, okay? Ectomorphs, very small bone structure typically. Typically doesn't have a good shoulder to waist ratio. They're more like a box. They're skinny, they're small people. They have a super fast metabolism. Their body, they can run through calories like there's no tomorrow. I mean, they have a racehorse metabolism. They can be short or tall. They have a really hard time putting on muscle, a very hard time putting on weight. They're typically not fat people, absolutely not. Ectomorphs have a super fast metabolism once again. So let's go to the diet for the ectomorph. Typically, the ectomorph, if you're trying to put on lean muscle, okay, probably super high calories, high protein, medium to high carbs, lower fats. Remember, we're trying to put on lean muscle. You could probably put in some healthy fats here and there to fill gaps. You're going to want to make sure they're eating or drinking a shake in 3-hour increments. So you could do, as a nutritionist or somebody who does diet plans, you could do a solid meal, 6 o'clock a.m., shake at 9, solid meal at 12, shake at 3, solid meal at 6, shake at 9. So meal, shake, meal, shake, meal, shake. You get the gist, right? That's how you want to do it with the Ectomorph, is making sure they're eating or drinking something every 3 hours, right? To consistently feed that muscle, consistently feed the body, and consistently make that progress that they're looking for, okay? Ectomorphs, anywhere from, I've worked with ectomorphs, anywhere from 1 to 3 cheat meals per week, anything to fill those gaps, anything to push the food, anything to get the body growing. So let's move on to ectomorph. Let's move to ectomorph workouts and cardio. Cardio with the ectomorph, damn near non-existent. You don't have to do a lot of cardio with an ectomorph. I would probably just stick to some very, very low intensity cardio here and there, nothing crazy, if any cardio at all. Ectomorphs, you want to use probably longer rest periods. You want to focus on initially the strength training portion, so the strength portion, so 1 through 5 reps early on, and then gradually increase the reps to like a 6 to 12 rep range. So with ectomorphs, first you want to make sure they develop that good strength base, master the basics, squat, bench, and deads, right? Once they master those, after about 6 to 8 weeks of that, you can probably try upping the reps to a 6 to 12 rep range and getting more advanced with your exercise selection. With ectomorphs, you want to make sure that they're getting at least a minute and a half to 2 minutes of rest in between sets. I recommend doing straight sets with ectomorphs. I don't recommend doing a lot of supersets and drop sets and short rest periods, because with ectomorphs, all of those things, all those training variables I just talked about, right? Shorter rest periods, supersets and drop sets could potentially speed up the metabolic rate, which is going to cause their metabolism to speed up when it's already super fast, and they're just going to burn right through that food that they ate, and they're going to have a harder time building muscle. So longer rest periods for ectomorphs, try initiating straight sets, and make sure they're moving the maximum amount of weight for the amount of reps they're trying to get, okay? Do not let them sandbag. Do not let them sandbag on the food. Do not let them sandbag on the heavy training. So let's do a quick recap. Endomorphs, a bigger body type, someone who has a slower metabolism, someone who gains body fat very easily, someone who has a bigger bone structure, someone who has someone who is probably naturally strong, someone who has a rough time with gaining and losing body fat, and an easy time with gaining body fat. Remember, strict on the diet, eating or drinking a shake in 3-hour increments, high protein, medium to high healthy fats, lower carbs. Be strategic with the carb placement, morning, pre, and post workouts, the time you should be feeding them carbs. 1 cheat meal a week, if that. Mesomorphs, the ideal athletic body type, great shoulder to waist ratio, pretty good metabolism, the ideal athletic body type. Move on to the diet, high protein, medium to high carbs, and on the lower end with the fats. You can throw some healthy fats in there too, that's cool. Eating or drinking a shake in 3-hour increments. Moving on to the training portion for the mesomorphs. You could initiate some, throw a couple of drop sets and supersets in there because their metabolism isn't quite as fast as the ectomorphs. With the mesomorphs, you can use a little bit longer rest period than you did with the endomorphs, right? Or sorry, with the mesomorphs, you can use longer rest period than you did with the endomorphs. You just want to make sure that you take a long enough rest period where they're recovering. Make sure they keep the weights relatively heavy, train in the 6 to 12 rep range. Cardio, here and there, I would say either low intensity or high intensity is fine. And then moving on to the ectomorph. Small bone structure, very fast metabolism, not a real good shoulder to waist ratio typically. They can be short or tall. Someone who has a fast metabolism, a tough time gaining muscle, a tough time gaining body fat, a tough time gaining any weight at all. So let's go to the diet. High protein, high carbs, medium healthy fats, You're going to make sure that they're eating or drinking a shake every 3 hours. Moving on to the training portion for the ectomorphs. Make sure that you're taking enough, make sure that they're getting long enough rest periods in between sets so they can maximize their strength during their sets, right? They're trying to move some heavier weights. They're trying to put on the muscle, right? Longer rest periods, keep the weights relatively heavy. You want to develop their strength base first and then shift to more of a hypertrophy rep range of 6 to 12 repetitions. So that pretty much covers the endomorph, mesomorph, and the ectomorph. Remember, big body endomorph, slow metabolism. Mesomorph, ideal athletic body.